Welcome back to another Q&A video. Post your questions down below and the most liked ones will be featured next time. Let's get started. Say you go to a busy gym and can't properly follow your program because the equipment you use is always full and you're limited on time. How much would it hurt your gains if you opt to do substitutions from time to time, for example, a dumbbell bench instead of a regular barbell bench? This is the unfortunate reality of training in commercial gyms. There will be times where you have to wait for others, and often you're not the only one waiting to use that equipment. You may lose your chance before someone else snatches it, or maybe all eyes are on you, so you feel compelled to rush your sets. And for supersets, which are the best way to save time, they may not be doable if the equipment is not close by, or maybe it's right next to you, but it's occupied. So what is the solution? Well, you must have a general program structure that is rather flexible, ensuring that the same movement patterns can be maintained, but that similar enough variations yield a comparable stimulus such that the net gains don't differ. So with your example, if all the flat barbell benching stations are taken, which is probable since the bench press is the ultimate bro lift, chances are there's a random adjustable or flat bench laying around. And if you're strong, the good news is that the heavy dumbbells should also be ready to use. See, most gym goers don't even hit 80 pounds. So if you're intermediate, you probably have between 80 to 120 pound dumbbells to work with. Plus there's the massive floor space if there's not one bench that you can use and you're really pressed for time. In which another long-term option is to train at a different time. Go on Google Maps and do not show up at the gym during peak hours. That's why I either train early or late, never between 5 and 7 p.m. Otherwise, you can always hog a power rack and have everything set up as one station. So a barbell and adjustable bench should allow you to train the whole body, and of course there's a pull-up bar, which if you also bring gymnastic rings, now dumbbells aren't even needed, allowing for seamless giant sets, thus cutting your workout time in half. Honestly, my suggestions depend on your exercise needs and how your gym is structured. So all I will say is that whatever is old school or that which scares normal gym goers, being not too fancy or pretty, but with a vibe of the past, is typically available because many lifters today are embarrassingly soft. Like I can tell you for a fact that the cable stations and hamstring machines are always overpopulated, so high chance you'll be waiting there. Whereas power racks are usually available. 9 out of 10 times there's one waiting for you. As are dip and pull-up stations, and so are heavy dumbbells past 100 pounds. So do the hard exercises that no one else wants to do, and it'll be like having your own private gym. If you go full-on machine mode, especially if it's not plate loaded, expect to wait. It is what it is. Anyway, going back to your initial idea. Yes, you could alternate exercise on a frequent basis, which is actually how I trained for much of my conjugate journey. Switch things up every 1 to 3 weeks, or if I felt like it, which didn't matter because everything was developing my weak points and hitting the same muscles. That's why it's crucial to examine functions over exercises and maintain sufficient intensity. Many people such as yourself have gotten amazing results with closed chain vertical pulls, but the last several years a lot of top natural bodybuilders have completely shifted to open chain vertical pulls for the hypertrophy work. Their reasoning seems to be the added stability giving better output potential and the ability to isolate the back more. What do you think about this approach? These natural bodybuilders you're referring to only started doing these exercises recently, at the earliest in 2019. And we're talking about 5 to 10% more gains tops, which is barely noticeable in most of these before and after photos that I've seen. Also, they're still not bigger than the natural bodybuilders of 10 years ago, or even the silver era bodybuilders who only did free weights, calisthenics, and some minor cable stuff, but certainly not the new biomechanics movements that we see today. So we can argue it's been several decades of the same outcome. Also, look at my back. It's definitely world class by natural bodybuilding standards. And although I may not be a pro because of my other muscles and lack of competitive experience, elite competitors who you likely follow have been wowed by my shredded back and publicly commented on how impressed they were. That says a lot because I built it exclusively with the hardcore basics. And in no way do I think my back would be any better if I were to do these novel optimal back movements. In fact, I've tried them and I understand all the reasons for programming them. But in my sincere opinion, they're overrated for reasons I've described in many other videos. For example, iliac pull downs are less stable than ghetto pull downs because you need to weigh down the bench and the legs aren't secure. And pull-ups done under control are quite stable, explaining why it's literally a competition lift in the sport of street lifting, so high motor unit recruitment is never a problem. And lat pull downs with heavy weight can actually be limited by the hip flexors and abs, as the thigh pad is not perfect. I can go on. If you want a dedicated video, let me know, but it's a stability continuum here. Long story short, natural bodybuilding has not evolved much, and the backs are not exploding. From what I've seen, mainly the legs have improved, but that's the same in the enhanced world, plus the X-taper is prioritized now. The back though, I'm not seeing it. And even if you could give me a good example, who's to say that particular bodybuilder wouldn't get the same, if not better results following some of the intelligent pulls that I promote? So I don't even think it's about the exercise. It's literally just time. Of course, if you train hard for 4 extra years, which is the duration we're seeing now, some back gains would occur. But is it really because of biomechanics? Or is it the addition of 1 to 2 pounds of lean tissue added here and there, which would have came regardless? You tell me, because I can argue the same transformation in myself. My back is monster level compared to 2019, and I was still jacked then. And again, even if what they're doing is superior, does it change the fact that most of the best natty backs of all time were not built this way, including the ones that switched over? If you examine the big picture, and especially the original natural bodybuilders, you'll see that I'm not making this up. What is your opinion on the back press with the chest expander, and how would you program it? For what it's worth, it's an old school competition lift that wrecks the delts, upper back, and triceps. It's a type of behind the neck press, but sideways, and emphasizes peak contraction, so you have to grind more, and it might be easier on the shoulder joints. For programming, just use simple double progression. That's how I train with all my expander movements, like you don't need to periodize your spring work. Do you think the Bronze Era guys who invented the device were doing that? Exercise science didn't even exist over a century ago. And crazy enough, the expander predates the barbell, so the training methods will obviously reflect their time. So all you have to do is work up to 10 to 12 reps, then add another spring. Now for benefits, it actually builds behind the neck pressing mobility, and I will credit it for reinforcing my tissue capacity to handle traditional BTN pressing, after not including it since 2016. Big mistake and regret, but anyway, I'm a lot more mobile now because of these behind the back expander motions. I say motion since the main exercise that worked for me is not the back press, but rather the sideways extension, which yields similar mobility gains, but is all triceps. That's unique, and you can't go as heavy since it's not a press. I feel this gives all the important benefits without needing any skill. Just extend your elbows. It's dummy proof, features less misgrooves, and is probably safer as well. So in my opinion, if you do behind the neck barbell pressing combined with sideways extensions, you're golden. There's no need to also back press unless you want to break some old school record. Hey Alex, my pull-up bar is 86 centimeters, 34 inches straight, not curved like yours. Is it good enough to perform wide grip pull-ups? Not bad, but that's not a super wide grip pull-up. After measuring my rack, you need at least 40 inches. And keep in mind, I'm 5'5" with short arms. So this angles out my forearms more than it would for an average or a tall height man. Meaning, for most lifters, 34 inches is gonna be a medium grip or slightly outside shoulder width apart. Now it's still a great variation, don't get me wrong, and I mix that in as well, scaled to my body dimensions, but you will not get the same self-limiting benefits that super wide has to offer. It's very simple. Are your forearms vertical or are they angled outward like a V formation? Film yourself to confirm. Also, if using a straight bar, this could be restrictive on the wrists since they want to cave outwards but can't. So I would actually recommend attaching D-handles, rings, or Swissies to allow for better stability and scapular control, because straight is not ergonomic when your hands are completely out. That's why a lot of pull-down bars also have that camber at the edge. You kind of need it if your arms are to be diagonal. Just try it in the air right now. See how your hand aligns with your forearms. It doesn't make sense to then crank your wrists in. It's not comfortable or ideal unless you are using a medium or close grip. Hi Alex, how do I ensure I hit proper intensity? I realize that is my biggest limiting factor. I got my consistency in going to the gym and nutrition, but I'm not hitting hard enough in the gym. So your diet and sleep can be perfect, but if you are not training hard enough, you will not stimulate the adaptations necessary for recovery to be warranted in the first place. That's why I made a video called Don't Waste Your Bulk. Because it is possible to gain 20 pounds of fat and not put on any muscle, purely because of improper programming. That's why 95% of my videos talk about programming, because it is the most important aspect, not nutrition, of which the basics are more than enough. Advanced nutritional knowledge is mostly helpful for health and longevity purposes, in addition to getting contest shredded. For muscle gain, you want 0.8 grams of protein per pound of lean body weight, as well as 8 to 9 hours of sleep per night, and being in a 5 to 10% calorie surplus for optimal recovery. If you cannot grow from that, then your training is 100% to blame. So what can you do if you know for a fact that you don't train hard? Well, if you don't trust yourself, then the first step is to guarantee training to failure. And when I say failure, I mean it in the literal sense, not 0 reps in reserve, which may or may not be accurate. Of course, you will refine this skill with time, but for now, given your inexperience with higher effort, hence the doubt, you need to literally get stapled. That's the only way to objectively confirm you gave it your 100%. Anything else is estimations subject to human error. Now you may be asking, what about safety? Isn't failing dangerous? Isn't it what's seen in failed compilations? Well, these are all illogical fears because if you do exercise that have safety measures in place, i.e. benching or squatting with properly set spotter arms, then the risk of injury is practically inexistent. Just to say, I've failed more times than I can count, and not once have I incurred any strain, including on barbell squats. I didn't lose my life like Justin Vicky, may he rest in peace. So you make sure that right below the end of the bottom range of motion, the barbell can gently land on the spotting system. Not that your spine, ribs, or neck takes on the brunt of the load. That should never happen. And if you do not have this setup or cannot customize the holes to be perfect, then my advice is to abandon these exercises altogether, which are usually barbell based. Just train with dumbbells, calisthenics, or machines that have built-in spotting mechanisms so that injuries are almost impossible. And no, you cannot trust humans either, as many competitive powerlifters have gotten crippled that way. Therefore, if you eliminate the fear by having the appropriate safety measures in place, combined with going to momentary muscular failure, then you will never, ever in a million years struggle to train hard. It's a simple fix. And if I could do this for years, being all alone in my home gym, which I got in 2018, and I'm still talking to you today, despite failing, and there's no excuse for anyone. Real ego lifting is not double checking your setup. How do you expect to grind when your subconscious mind senses death? Fix your setup. It's a mechanical problem, after which unlocks everything else. Or else, just become a machine bro, but still go to momentary muscular failure. And by the way, when you make the switch, please drop your volume by at least 1 set per exercise, or else you will have a hard time recovering. Unless you're a ranked beginner, you cannot mix high intensity and high volume at the same time, at least long term. So please don't run yourself into the ground because no amount of food or sleep will compensate. As a serious lifter, you know the struggle of trying to find jeans that fit. They're always super stiff and tight around the quads or family jewels, being very uncomfortable and hard to move in. So if you're tired of wearing clown pants and even shirts that don't snug the guns, which is the opposite problem, then you need to check out Barbell Apparel's Black Friday sale. I've been rocking their gear for 8 months now, and it's essentially the only clothes I wear in and out of the gym. You'll be mind blown by the quality since it's perfected for real lifters like us. And right now you can get any athletic fit jeans, chinos, or pants for just $99 and the 2.0 for $20 more. Oh, and just so you know, they sold out for 8 years straight, so don't miss out. Check my link in the description box. And it's time to accentuate your hard-earned physique. Hey Alex, why do I find better results with back training when being explosive with heavier loads, aka cheating concentric and loading eccentric compared to using controlled hypertrophy techniques? The main reason is that almost every back motion you do, whether vertical or horizontal, is not lengthen biased. The top part of a pull-up, the top part of a row, this is where the sticking point is with free weights and cables. The only way to make it harder at the bottom is with specific lever-based loading, which can be your own body weight like with rack chins, or using expensive machines that make the resistance hardest at the very start and easiest at the end. Prime Fitness is one of the few companies implementing this, so consider yourself blessed if you have access because each piece is $5,000. Now, because muscles are weakest in the shortened position, which will always be a limiting factor in pulls, it makes sense why being explosive can help smooth out the less than ideal strength curve. You can still control the negative and hold the stretch in the bottom with some upper back rounding, but then a small jolt can help even out those top end joint angles. That's why cheat reps, or including some body English, has historically been hypertrophic on traditional back movements. It's why for 2 years of doing jerky pulls from 2016 to 2017, my back exploded in size. I was barbell rowing over 3 plates and it showed. Now obviously, The stimulus to fatigue ratio is poor, and we can always do lengthened partials at the end like a mechanical drop set. So it's not necessary to cheat, but still, it doesn't change the fact that it works. And I personally believe that for some, it's best to mix in explosive work, like with weighted pull-ups. I do slow reps and fast reps because getting the chin over the bar is hard as we approach failure. And you basically know it's the same thing, but we're unable to explain it. I couldn't either back then. I just credited the weighted stretch overload. But really, it was simply that I was no longer limited by the top end joint angles. So the most productive bottom range became emphasized, and high effort was always guaranteed. How do you maintain intensity if you want to train circuit style or at least superset your major movements? Are just some days that I only have around an hour to fit in a workout, difficult to go hard when you're not optimally resting between exercises. Best strategy is to split your rest intervals in half within the superset itself. Traditionally, you would rest for 3 minutes between exercises if alternating in a push-pull fashion. Well, here, you would combine the two exercises but rest only 90 seconds in between. This way, you have a chance to recover your breath, lower fatigue, and maximize motor unit recruitment while still building work capacity and saving time. It's the best compromise, especially for brutal, big exercises. Speaking of which, be careful with what you pair. The axial loaded, high coordination, high internal stability stuff is what will mess you up the most, since you're not just limited by muscular force output. That's why it's hard to superset barbell squats with other lower body exercises like deadlifts and lunges, especially with higher reps. And that's another thing. If you're doing circuits for hypertrophy, stay away from the 15 to 20 rep range, which is most common here. Use the lowest reps of 5 to 10, but 5 is best, which allows you to get 2 exercises within the same normal time frame of 1 higher rep set. And honestly, selectorized machine training is an excellent option here, since you can easily move on to the next one and make quick adjustments if necessary, especially if sharing equipment. So believe it or not, the worst thing to circuit train is barbell work, since you need more than one preset in various stations, and it's hard to hold on to all of them. With calisthenics, it's simple, pull-ups and dips, and the floor or rings are always available and in one spot. So that's the last tip. Make sure everything is close by and that you don't have to rig up multiple setups per circuit because that too takes time. Would you recommend skipping the top part of a narrow grip vertical pull for lats? If the goal is just lats, then yes. At higher levels of humeral elevation, the lats lose leverage, so you don't need to enter a dead hang. Of course, doing so builds serious shoulder mobility and yields more overall back gains in the traps and rear delts, while making the exercise harder and more controlled. So I think it is a better pull-up for everyone except advanced lifters who specifically have lagging lats. And even then, both should be included, and this is not an excuse to do partials at the bottom. I want to see locked arms, just that the shoulders aren't coming up towards the ears, so it's that last bit of scapular manipulation that is cut out. And if doing this, use a wider grip to further limit the humeral elevation. Otherwise, a neutral grip with some spinal flexion and not stretching all the way is fine. And the same applies to lat pull downs. But honestly, I must emphasize that all these biomechanics gurus talking about how they want to disengage their yoke surprisingly have the most pathetic yokes I've ever seen in my life. The vast majority would seriously benefit from full range of motion. And even with me, despite the fact that I'm not lagging here, I still go all the way down as my main style for the difficulty aspect alone, and so that my volume is efficient, especially since I do 2 vertical pulls per workout, only 1 horizontal. So I, and many others, prefer having that extra upper back emphasis. Like, why would you not want more traps? It's like those skinny guys who are like, yeah, let's shut off my traps from lateral raises. Bro, your whole body's 2D. And it's the same situation with lat bias pull-ups. They're great, I love them, but if I can only do 1 pull-up, you bet it's gonna be with a dead hang, because it recruits more muscles. I deadlifted in the past year, then my plates weren't enough, so I switched to RDLs and now I RDL 220 and my plates are done. So is doing good mornings a great option or what? Kilograms or pounds? Let me answer this question in 2 ways. If you're doing RDLs with almost 5 plates, you're even stronger than me. There's no need to buy another pair of 45s and try to build up to 500 to 600 for reps, which I guarantee would be the classic power builder answer. Forget about that, unless you're up for the challenge and have some elite deadlift goals. The smarter option is getting more out of less weight, which is best done with good mornings, but technically you can keep milking RDLs. By standing on mats with a deficit version, you'll instantly strip off 20 kilos, and if you pause at the bottom and reach forward, like with what Bald Omni-Man recommends, you'll drop another 20 kilos. So this could give you another year or 2 of building back up to your initial PRs, just now with more range of motion and disadvantageous leverages. Otherwise, copy me with the good mornings and you'll likely be down to 3 plates, which is basically double the drop of the hardest RDL variation. So you tell me what's better from a low body stimulus fatigue standpoint. Do you want the extra traps, lats, and forearms? Do you mind going heavy like this when the same posterior chain benefits can be achieved with 70% of your normal working weights? Up to you, but I'm team good morning. Like I'm usually in the 185 to 315 zone, and that's as a 600-pound deadlifter. So I get off to the fact that my recovery is never compromised and that I don't have to load up all these darn plates. Kills the ego too. Lastly, as a spin on your question, if you meant to tell me that your delta is only 2 plates per side, aka 225, then you still have linear progression gains to milk. So why not at least buy 1 pair of 45s and build up to 3 plates for 10? That'll be enough to deadlift 4 plates for a single, and your newbie gain should be tapped out. After that, you can switch to good mornings, starting with 95 pounds, and rebuild from there. Or do both. How about that? That's what my novice program included some years back, and it's a safe combo even for first-year lifters. You can start doing good mornings today. I sure wish I did at the start. Might be a dumb question, but I heard many people say if you're a beginner, then you don't need as much volume to grow, so keep it as low as possible. So in the future, when you plateau, you have another tool in the toolbox. On the other hand, I've heard when you're a beginner, you have superior recovery capabilities, therefore you can push the volume a lot without having overuse and overlap problems. What do you think is the correct approach? Love your content. Couple things to say here. Many lifters do not train to failure or have the skill or neural adaptations yet to push super hard. So they're actually leaving more reps in the tank than their muscles are capable of. And since they're so weak, the absolute load barely stresses the joints, whether it's low reps or not. So every exercise imaginable has a perfect stimulus to fatigue ratio. In fact, it's inverted in such an odd way where the stimulus vastly outweighs the fatigue. Like I can't put a number on it, I'd estimate 60-70%, but literally every brutal axial load exercise you can think of equals more out of less weight until you master movement patterns and develop base strength, which means by default, you can handle more volume. This is why beginners often do 3 sets of 5 back squats every 48 hours and have 0 knee or back pain with consistent linear progression. If I tried that, by day 3, my body would be aching. And if I tried this for 3 months, I'd get injured or at least need a serious deload. And by the way, let's say these beginners train with 0 reps in reserve, they still recover better than an advanced lifter just because a 1 to 2 plate squat ain't shit on net recovery. And it's also true that because beginners are so sensitive to everything, they can improve later on without a maximized program, just by adding a few more sets to their current routine. So as they get closer to intermediate, they often jump from 3 sets to 5 sets. Now, do I think this is necessary? No. In fact, I might tell them to drop a set and train harder. But it is an option that has historically worked. And that's the important point here. Everything works. That's why you're confused, bro. Because you can go either way and still get to the same end destination. It's all about preference. But one more thing. I feel like the frequency aspect is the X factor for beginners, and that they could do more volume on otherwise hard to recover exercises like deadlifts. So if I did 3 sets of 5 with 500 pounds, my posterior chain would be destroyed for a week, and the rest of my workout or upcoming sessions would suffer. Whereas if a beginner does that with 225, he can repeat it 40 hours later and add 10 pounds. That's the difference. They can do more work with higher intensity and frequency, defying the basic laws of programming. That's why novice programs are the way they are, and why 0 advanced lifters train anything that resembles that. It's why I will never run my own novice program. I can't. I'm gonna get hurt, and so will all my peers who are past a certain strength level. It really boils down to strength. And that's why I talk about strength for novices and set standards, not to turn them into powerlifters, but to make them realize that it sets the groundwork moving forward. All right, last question. Hey Alex, would doing only tricep pushdowns and tricep overhead extensions be good enough for tricep gains, or do I need to do movements like skull crushers or close grip bench? Mini rant, but listen up. I did a 380 close grip bench back in 2021, and my arms were just 16.5 inches, which is big for my height, but not reflective of that elite strength. And I bet that right now, I cannot bench that. Plus, if I were to peak, it would likely be the same number, yet my arms are now 17.2 inches. So how did I, at best, maintain my close grip bench press strength, yet add all this meat? How did my triceps finally grow? Simply put, it was by improving my triceps isolation strength. I used to do dumbbell extensions with 35 to 40 pounds per hand. Now I do 60 pounds per hand with strict form. not the rollback version. My pushdown also went from 95 for 5 to 115 for 10. And my sideways extension went from 5 springs to 7 springs. And these days I'm using industrial springs, which are 3 times stronger per spring. Of course, certain compounds have improved here and there, but my arms hit 17 inches well before the noticeable PRs. So the majority of my improvements came through direct isolation numbers going up, in addition to mixing in dual rope or spreader pushdowns for the long hit. Basically being properly lined up through the elbows, some external rotation and shoulder extension, just building the part of my triceps that was lagging. So learning how to do extensions pain-free was important. And I've explained how to do this in my elbow pain solution segments. And there's many workout videos where I document all the variations I do. But going back to your question, if you just did pushdowns and overhead extensions, you would effectively get the squeeze in with the best recovery and warm-up, and the extensions would emphasize the way to stretch, even with cables. So to then add a skull crusher is technically redundant, because even with free weights, it's the same function, elbow extension. The only reason why I'd include them is for a B-day, to possibly minimize overuse. And I want to get stronger on that movement. Why not have different exercises to experiment? Why be a fucking minimalist when it comes to lagging body parts? So day 1 can be a V-bar pushdown and overhead cable extension. Day 2, do a rope pushdown and dumbbell extension. That's a great way to blend things up. It's not complicated and adds a little bit of variety to spice up your training, maybe get a bit more gains. But the resistance profiles are exactly the same as what I'm telling you, free weights or not. So you're all set with that. And for the compound movements, they're still important to net a high general stimulus. Like you can't just stop pressing. I certainly didn't. And the improved isolation strength will feed into your compounds, allowing you to get more out of them. So they're still effective. And if you are torso dominant, you should do the close grip bench, especially off an incline to get more range of motion to bottom, more arm bend. And you should do reverse grip bench for more triceps. And you should do diamond push-ups as well. And you should do narrow grip overhead presses plus triceps dips. Doesn't mean you have to do wide grip and close grip one after the other, resulting in more weekly pressing volume. Like you can make the full switch. Your pecs will be just fine if you do close grip only. If the triceps are limiting your physique, that is what you need the most. So who cares? Embrace it. But don't stop doing the big stuff that set your foundation. And know that my pressing strength still played a role in my final arm size. Let's not kid ourselves here. So with that said, we're done this Q&A. Great questions. Please post some more down below, and I'll see you in the next one.